Well, thank you everyone for coming today for our session where we discussed any challenges that organizations face when it comes to regulatory reporting and how your HR technologies can support that journey. So a bit of introductions of ourselves. My name is Tran. I'm the functional and analytics solution architect at HR Path. Apart from Workday implementation, that I also support different initiatives that involve with Workday reporting, Prism analytics, or data. I let my colleague introduce himself before we dive into the session.
Hi folks, yeah, I'm Gordon Cathcart. I'm a solution architect at HR Path as well. So working in that Workday space primarily, looking after Workday reporting, analytics, Workday Prism, things like that. Around 15 years experience in that HR analytics world in some sort of form or another. So nice to be with you all today.
Right, so what are regulatory reporting? So I'm sure you're aware, let's face with the reality today. There are many regulatory requirements that organizations have to commit to. For example, in the UK, I'm sure you are aware, there's this gender pay gap that organizations are required to submit the pay disparities annually. And then there's also this director remuneration reporting where it dives into the pay transparency of the executives. And when we look into like Europe, for example, the landscape is expanding even more. So there's this pay transparency directive where organizations are not only required to report on the pay gaps, but also justify it and also take action on it. And we know it's not just the numbers of regulations, right? It's the direction of travel. It's going to be more granular, it's going to be more frequent. We know more regulations are coming. Organizations are required to do more things in the future to make sure they're transparent, make sure they are fair in terms of the diversity and ethnicity, for example. And we know that more requirements are coming. And Gordon, do you think of any other examples apart from what I just said?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of customers who will have things such as sort of cross-border working directives. So particularly within that European area, we're looking at what country do employees live in versus where are they actually working? How many days are they spending working in that country versus other countries? And that can have tax implications, it can have social security related implications. So it's really important that that's tracked, managed, and then reported effectively and accurately and responsibly. We've got customers touching in, for instance, the Northern Ireland area where there's reporting around sort of community background that needs to be captured. Again, potentially quite sensitive information and how that is captured, how that is managed, how that is held, and what that information is used for. So a lot of these regulations are very specific, quite niche requirements, but again, very important for those areas, for those countries, and for customers working in those areas, that they are adhering to those reporting requirements and that they are meeting the requirements of those pieces. So yeah.
Yeah, so what other organizations are doing today, and this is speaking from our own experience with our clients. Surprisingly, all of the things we just mentioned, all of the examples of regulatory requirements, they're still doing it manually. Even though you might have like a cool, very nice HR system, automated things, majority of our clients, they still export reports from different systems. It could be your HR system, could be your finance, your payroll. You still manipulate it outside of that system. So lots of spreadsheets, lots of manual calculations. The process handled by like one person try to work out, okay, what's the calculation that it has to be? What's the population that we need to report on? All of that is handled offline. And then once they got the number, they just submit it to whatever government bodies that they have to do, and that stopped there. And then after that, there's also the process of playing that back to the business. And when you talk about HR team telling the executives, this is your gender pay gap, this is the percentage, this is the number. There's also a back and forth conversation of where the data's coming from. And of course, that involves more of the person going back to the system, try to look more into the data points, like try to explain why it happened, why we have that percentage. And it's even harder to answer like what happened between last year, the number like has been rising from last year to this year, like why that happened. So it's just a lot more effort to try to answer those questions when you have a manual model. Right, so but why are they doing it this way, you think?
Yeah, well, One of the main drivers is that idea that it is regulatory reporting. So fundamentally, the consumer of this isn't somebody within our organisation that we can point to an inbuilt report that we built on our system, the way we might want to do with our HR partners or our managers or others within the business. Fundamentally, we need to take this information out of our infrastructure and give it to somebody else. And that often leads to then, well, let's just take that raw set of data out. We'll do the whole reporting process, the calculation methodology offline, and then submit it at the end, as opposed to taking just the output of a calculation that's done internally and submitting it offline. There's just the fact that it is that idea, it's regulatory reporting. This isn't necessarily the most exciting day-to-day topic. It's not necessarily what everybody in your leadership or your HR leaders want to be talking about day to day. So it's not necessarily where we want to spend maybe our time and our resource into building more robust or more appropriate solutions for how we handle that. It might be that quite often, because the requirements for these reporting regulations are quite niche, they're quite specific, they don't necessarily align to the definitions of how we think about or how our companies think about things internally day to day. So something like, again, the gender pay gap reporting, just a basic definition of who is included, who is an active employee for that report, is a different definition than what a company would think about as their internal headcount or their internal FTE. Or what pay elements do we include when we do that calculation? It's probably slightly different than what you would be looking at internally when you're thinking about average pay or average pay per grade or job family, things like that. So we don't necessarily want to confuse by having different versions of similar metrics in that core reporting suite. And so again, they've tried to historically keep that separate. And part of the reason is just that's the way we've always done it. It's a process that's been in place, it's 10 years, Joe blogs over there, once a year, they manage this. None of the rest of us really know how they do it, but it's always worked, it's all how we've always done it, and so it's just how we're going to do it again. It's a once a year thing, we do it, we get it done, it's submitted, and we don't think about it again for the other year. So what are the challenges of that approach then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite clear we can see some challenges. Well, not really challenges, but some disadvantage that comes with these manual models, right? And because you're doing it once a year, it's just a point in time. Let's say we have to do it by June. Someone will go in, run through the manual spreadsheet to submit those numbers. There's little connection to what actually happened through the past whole year. It doesn't link to your actual HR processes, your hiring pipeline or whatsoever. There's no kind of underlying analysis. So just a point in time, that's your number, that's it. There's no story behind it, right? And then anything that's handled manually, there's a risk of data security. And given the data that we're handling, like gender pay gap or pay transparency, is a huge sensitive information that comes with it. And obviously, when everything's sensitive, we try to make sure no one's like extracting the data, storing data in their own laptop, right? And that's the risk that we're talking about of these manual process. And usually these processes, it rely on one like individual knowledge. So that one person that's so familiar with the process, they know where the spreadsheets are, they know where the macros in those Excels, how to run it, and if they want to change what column they need to adjust. It's the single point of failure because we just rely on that one person's knowledge for running it. And let's say if you give two people the same job of doing the same thing manually, would they be able to produce out the same number? Maybe not. So that's also that challenge as well, that maybe the way they understand the percentage or how it should be calculated is also different and not aligned.
Yeah, we've got that idea of auditability as well. So we're submitting this data to regulatory bodies. We expect at some point that we should be able to produce a good audit trail of what we submitted, how we submitted it, how did we define those calculations, what exclusions did we make, did we include, what were the reasons behind those. So all that needs to be robust and auditable and repeatable. Back to the example V's made, if we gave that same individual who created that result last year the same set of input data again and asked them to do that again, would they get that same result again? Would they confidently be able to reproduce that in the same way again? In a lot of organizations, that's not the case. It's that repeatability and auditability. We've got the idea of scalability as well. So yes, we're creating this this piece of calculus reporting, we're submitting, we're looking at our overall gender pay gap, but increasingly businesses are going to want to understand, well, what does that look like, not just at overall, but in specific locations, or in specific compensation grades, or specific job families. How can we repeat that analysis and that methodology in different lenses, different tool sets? We've maybe got a situation where we need to start thinking about ethnicity pay gap as well as gender pay gap. So we're going to start to need to repeat that entire process around a different lens as well. Or we want to start thinking about that in different countries as well. So how, again, if that's all sitting in that one manual process that those individuals are running, how scalable is that? How can we do that? So, any other examples, Via, from our customers that bring some?
Yeah, I think lots of customers came to us with like lots of spreadsheets that they are using. I think I saw one spreadsheet with like 10 different tabs on it because they're trying to like merge the data. They're trying to like cut out people because they think they are out of scope, and there are certain tabs on specified like calculations when it comes to like pay or the relevant compensation details. And it's just very overwhelming, honestly. And even ourselves, we are like familiar with the technologies and all the formulas. We find that process very overwhelmed for HR teams. And that is why we're here to advocate for the new shift and what we think HR teams should be doing instead.
So fundamentally, obviously, what we would be advocating is that we start using our data, our employee data, in a safe and secure and controlled way. We're talking about the data relating to our employees. We should be treating that as an asset. It's highly sensitive, particularly some of the reporting elements that we're including in some of these regulatory reportings, where we're looking at pay, we're looking at ethnicity, we're looking at backgrounds, things like this. It's sensitive employee information, and we want to be managing that asset in a proper, controlled, responsible way. We want to be avoiding data breaches where we can harm ourselves reputationally externally, but most importantly, we can harm our reputation with our employers. If we lose that data, if we mishandle that data, then the reputation we have as an employer to our employees is hugely damaged. So we'd be advocating that fundamentally we are retaining that data, that storage of that data, and the management of our employee data in a controlled, secure framework where the right individuals have access to that data via the right security rules and the right audit trail. We then would envision a data transformation stage, a platform that will allow you then to build in the rule sets, around those specific regulatory reports, where we can do any of that transformation, where we can supplement that data with any additional data, external data that's part of that, and we can do that all in a controlled, repeatable, automated framework. Again, where access to that is properly controlled via existing security matrices and security rules. And then we overlay that with a reporting visualization layer. So we can now provide dashboards, we can provide reports, we can provide that drillability to the right employees, to the right roles within our organization, to our HR partners, to our business leaders, so they can see that information, they can see the trends, they can drill into that to the right level without necessarily being able to see the underlying employee level data that sits behind that, but we're doing that in that secure way. And fundamentally, we should have that architecture and that structure in place for our HR reporting in general anyway. And if we've not got that in place, then that's definitely something we need. Again, that HR data is fundamentally an asset. It's something that we need to be controlling. So we should have that architecture in place in our organizations anyway. And we want to leverage that architecture and that idea for these regulatory reports again. We want to move away from the idea of it's not particularly exciting, it's once a year, so we'll just do this bit offline, to making sure that that process is treated the same way as we do with the rest of our core HR reporting and analytics functionality, that it's done in a secure and responsible way. And we want to do that not just because it can avoid those regulatory risks, those data breaches, in a risk avoidance way, but because it can unlock a range of additional benefits and as well. So Viv, what would some of those advantages of this methodology be as well?
Yeah, so I think this is not just about regulatory reporting, it's all your reporting requirements, right? If you move it to a more automated model, if you use your system, if you utilize whatever the functionality your system offer, then you can kind of take advantage of these automated calculations, right? So we embed in those calculations. No one has to like download and then do their own manipulation of the data and calculate it themselves. And of course, whether that's like in-scope employees or different complex pay calculations, we can also do that. And I think it's easier to track as well when we build everything in either your HR system or another reporting platform that you might do. And like Gordon said, it's not one-off, right? You have the opportunity to run it monthly or quarterly, depending on what you need. And the advantage of having that opportunity is to know it like early, to track the trend, to know the anomalies in advance, to have that conversation with the business, with the leaders of, okay, we know it's coming, we know we're going to submit this number, we know it's going to be public, what should we do about this? And of course that would lead to like more conversations around strategy or decision making later on. And the third advantage is we can apply a global lens. I can give an example of, for example, go back to our gender pay gap example. I know it's going to be required for like the UK or maybe Ireland, but why don't we apply it across all regions that you have, across the global? Because it's such a good metrics to measure. It's such a nice story to tell how the workforce is doing or how you're doing with your employees, right? We can use it to apply the same consistent framework across all regions. And there's an opportunity to slice the data however you like it. You can slice it by different compensation level, different geography, locations, different business units, however you want, to see that what's happening behind that global or that country number. You can explain a bit of the data behind. You can see, you can compare different insights between different markets, maybe different countries, and give your reasons why it's happening the way it is. And finally, the process I mentioned earlier about playing that back to the business leaders of these numbers, these metrics, and then the going back and forth of trying to answer. Now, with these interactive dashboards or reports, we can give it back to the executives to run it themselves. So they can run it, they can see the number, they can track the percentage, or they can throw into different data points, they can slice the data themselves as well. They can also compare different functions unit and see that even the very detailed line by line data behind it. So even before them coming to HR with questions, they can answer the questions themselves, and they can, the time saving from that is really huge. And they can use that time to start thinking about what can we do about the workforce and what can we do to drive our decisions for the next year to make it better. And yeah, so you think with this new lots of advantages, what is the benefits that the business will have?
Yeah, so we want to try to move to a model where we're not having once a year, we're running that piece of analysis and we're saying, oh, wait a minute, our gender pay gap just increased. That's a surprise. We want to be in a position where we're able to track that throughout the year. Businesses are aware of what that looks like. They've got access to that. They can understand the trends in that. They can see what the drivers for those trends are. If it's at a particular job family, is it in a particular location? But more importantly, where we can start bringing the methodology and the calculations around that particular metric into the other business processes that we have within our HR system. So if we're going through a round of recruitment at the moment, what would the result of that recruitment be on our gender pay gap? If we're going through a promotion nomination period at the moment, what would the result of those promotions be on that gender pay gap? Or we're running our advanced comp cycle, we're looking to pay out bonuses. How are they impacting that? How does that lens onto that? And fundamentally, we're moving to a world where we expect our HR leaders, our business leaders to have access to AI-related tools, where they expect to be able to ask a question of, what happens if I make this strategic business decision? What are the risks of that? What are the benefits and what are the costs of that? It would be great if those the results of that would be able to include things such as gender pay gap implications of that, for example. So if we reduce our location footprint in this location and increase here, or we want to strategically reduce a particular type of job family and increase a different type, what is the impact of that? Well, those AI models can fundamentally only deliver that insight if they have access to the data, to the rules and the logic that we use to derive those calculations. Those models cannot deliver that insight if all of that thought process, if all of that methodology is sitting in somebody's laptop in an Excel that's not connected to that wider landscape. So we want to bring all of these parts within that structured, responsible, governed IT landscape, our HR data landscape, where we're able to provide that reporting in a structured and controlled way, and we can leverage that data, that insight, in a more frequent and a more usable way.
And yeah, I think like with the new world, talking about AI, robotic, automate your process, why is still so manual in HR? So that's the key message we want to lay out there, right? The key takeaways is you have the data. Usually organizations do not face with like data availability issues. Every organization should have nice data. Is transform the way that you work with the data, how you use the data to drive better decisions. And it's also shifting the purpose of reporting. It's not just to fulfill a certain regulatory requirements or business requirement. It's to tell the story, right? It's to understand what happens behind the scene, what happens in your workforce, and use it to inform like better decisions and drive your strategy forward. And we believe because of all the like, automation, all the future ways of working, of doing like AI and automated process, we should be front end with the with HR function as well. Where you can automate solution, you should do it. Where you can make use of your system, you should definitely do it. We shouldn't rely on these manual offline solutions anymore. And that's the future ways of HR reporting, not just to produce reports, but to drive decisions, making better strategy for the business. And that's a wrap for our session today. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts?
You feel free to, you can come to us to the stand if you want to. Yeah, don't want to.
Great.
We also be at the booth BB34 just over there if you want to have conversation about any of your reporting needs. Thank you.
Thank you.